Eileen McDargh is a tiny little lady with an enormous spirit. When she walks into a room, it immediately gets lighter and brighter. It's impossible to be in one of Eileen's audiences without experiencing a range of positive emotions and to leave feeling better about yourself for having been in her presence. She makes you think, she makes you feel, and she makes you smile. Her professional speaking career began back in 1984 when a meeting planner from the Marriott hotel chain attended an adult education extension course she was teaching at a local college. At that time, Eileen was a teacher. Well, this meeting planner sent the course catalog to one of her clients, and that client called and asked if Eileen could come and speak at one of their meetings. The client liked her so much that they asked her back to speak at other meetings. According to Eileen, it took a colleague of hers to make her realize that this speaking thing was actually a business. The speaking business. A pivotal moment in her speaking career, a turning point, was when she shifted her focus from training to keynotes, from teaching to motivating and inspiring. Now she does mostly keynotes and includes training and facilitation when clients ask for it or when the need arises. Eileen's topic niche is leadership development in work, in life, and through change. She helps organizations and individuals transform the life of their business and the business of their life through conversations that matter and connections that count. I've had the privilege of seeing Eileen speak on the main stage at NSA, and I can attest to the fact that she is an amazing storyteller, drawing you into her stories and characters and carrying you along on a journey of discovery and deep meaning. While Eileen has never studied story theater with me, she exemplifies everything that I teach by making her stories come alive with acting, staging, vivid characters, and wonderful vocal delivery. When Eileen and I sat down for this interview in a hotel room in Newport Beach, California, she was more than happy to share a few of her gold nuggets of wisdom with us. I'm pleased to bring you this interview with my friend and mentor, Eileen McDargh. You're a very, very brave speaker. Every time I've seen you in front of an audience, you're just so courageous. You just go for it. You're very theatrical. You're emotional. What encouragement can you give to other people that are starting out in the speaking business or people that feel stuck and constrained by themselves to get out of their way and be more theatrical and be more playful and be more brave?
I think one of the pieces of advice that I would give is that when you develop the story that will make your point, that you get out of your own way. You become the story, so you're not giving a book report, but you actually say, come, be here with me, experience this with me. And when you care enough about the audience and the point that you're going to make, you do become the story, and you forget who you are, and you become it in the moment.
Within the story, where do you become the story? There's a certain amount of narrative that is past tense where you're bringing the audience along, but I call it an in moment in a story where you actually go present tense and reenact a moment. Is that what you're talking about, becoming the story, being the story?
I think that would be accurate, and I think the way I would become a story is once you set it up, you actually play the different roles. And I like to do dialect. I like to do dialogue. And I think that one of the critical pieces in developing story, I know that's one of the questions, Doug, that you are interested in about how do you choose and develop stories, is that you pay very close attention and you listen to how people say things. And when something captures and grabs you, you go back and relive that. And when you relive it, you become the little kid that says, but Mommy, why do I have to do that? Or you become your great uncle, who talked to you like this, and then you relive that story right there. That's the Celtic in me coming out, the Scot part. So I think it's the dialect to me that allows me so that I become the story. What you also do is you forget the words like he said, she said, I said, and you allow the voice to become the different people, so you no longer need these quotation marks.
Now, it sounds like you are a keen observer of behavior then. You're always watching people. Now, speakers always say, I really watch people in airports and I'm always studying them. This is what actors do like crazy. We study behavior. But what I'm hearing you saying is, I not only study behavior, I have an ability to mimic and play with it, and you get out of your way and allow yourself to do that. That's what I consider brave. Is that what you do? Do you study people and then play with that at home? Do you practice that?
It's interesting. I think if I practiced it, it would be to go home and tell the story of something that I observed. That I will go to my next door neighbor and talk about my two little grandkids and the fact that I have a hand puppet, a purple hand puppet, whose name is Barnacle. Well, Barnacle kind of talks like this to the kids. And Barnacle has some wonderful pieces of wisdom that he has learned from those grandkids. And when I tell the story to my neighbors and I watch their responses, I'm thinking, you know, I could use this on the platform. There is a point to be made here.
Now, what I'm hearing you say is you have these instincts and you immediately say, oh, I'm going to take that out in front of my audience. I'm going to play with that in front of my audience. Whereas I believe a lot of speakers might experience playfulness off stage, but they cut themselves off and they say, well, that's not credible. That's not professional. My audiences don't want me to be like that. They want me to be intelligent. They want me to deliver content. What would you say to them?
Well, number one, I think I am a high content speaker. Well, I'm not just into it for fluff and stuff. But I do believe that when you play, when you become the story, you carry the listener with you. Now, the story must have a point. You can't tell a story just because you like it. And there are some stories that have multiple points. If you don't make the connection, then the audience is sitting there saying, so what the heck is that for? And in fact, there are times in which I will tell a story, and it might even be an emotional story, and I will step back from it, and I say, now, why in the world did I tell you that now? What is the context that you are experiencing, and what's the significance of this?
Do you spend a lot of time once you have an idea for a story thinking about how can I use it and where will I use it, and occasionally you disregard a story or edit it out and say, I can't use it, I just don't know what I'd use it for, it doesn't work?
I do have a list of signature stories, and some of them are major vignettes, and some of them are just one-liners. And oftentimes I even forget to put them down. I am constantly uncovering new things. So I don't have a standard line of, okay, I'm going to use this story, that story, though I have some obviously that are favorites because they make a point. I think for me, being in the moment with the audience allows me sometimes to create some interesting parallels and analogies for them. If I can give you an example, a number of years ago, 2 years ago actually, I spoke for Procter & Gamble IT, and they were going through significant change. And these are folks who, in the work that they do, literally in their computer systems touch the lives of billions of people around the planet with Procter & Gamble products. And it so happened that I took a red eye that night and got to see the planet Mars from the airplane. And I had just read that at this time it was the closest that Mars had been in some, 56 million years. And so I found, that morning, I got up and I found a picture of Mars. And I put it up on the screen. And this was my clothes. And I said, what is this? And some people knew. I said, it's the red planet. I said, let me tell you what happened the last time this planet came this close to Earth. Neanderthal men did not have a password, did not type their name on a keyboard, but took ochre in their mouth, put a hand on the wall, and blew. That fingerprint still exists today. What you do now, you have a fingerprint that also leaves a mark on everything this organization does. It is not by coincidence that you and I are here together at the very same time. This planet is the closest to the Earth.
Wow. That got him, didn't it?
It suddenly did. And that was a gift that came out of nowhere, Doug. I didn't plan it. All of a sudden, I thought, it puts it in perspective. It gives them a context that is very real and very tangible if I can connect those dots. Never told that story before. Never told it since then.
Did it touch you when you were telling it? Did you feel emotion?
Oh, I did. I did. And I put my hand up as if it were against a wall, and I blew. And I slowly moved my hand away from the wall. And all of us watched the fingerprint, the handprint on the wall. And they understood the importance of what they do and how they create their systems.
Do you have any acting background? Have you studied acting at all?
You know, that's so funny. I get a lot of people that ask me that, and actually I never have. I studied speech in high school and was on the debate team and the extemp team and actually did some oral interpretation. But I have always been a voracious reader, and I love to read out loud. Well, if you read out loud, and if you read to children, children demand that you create character for them. So I think that's probably one of the things. And then, while, believe it or not, I was shy as a child, in playing with my brother and sister, we would create characters and we'd become characters. We were the Indian princesses, and we were the cowboys that roamed the field, and we would really get into characters. And if that's any part of acting, then maybe as a child I did, but no formal study.
Well, what is amazing as an actor, as a theater director, as someone who spent many, many years in that craft and studying that craft, your use of the dramatic inflection, your use of timing and rhythm and emotion are exactly what many, many actors strive for many years. And it's exactly what I'm always working with people to get, is to just slow down and feel. And taste the language. Allow the moments to be what they are. They don't all have to be narrative, fast-paced, descriptive. It's like, feel them. When I listened to you talking about Mars, I became emotional just listening to it, partially because of the imagery that you painted on my movie screen, on my imagination, but also because of the reverence that you have for the image itself. So what I'd like to ask you about is emotion. Emotion is a critical element, I believe, in storytelling. There are two critical elements in really powerful stories, and there are the obstacle and how you overcome that obstacle. And in overcoming obstacles in life, it is emotional. We're frustrated, or we're in pain, or we're challenged by those obstacles. But we find our resolve in our stories to overcome those obstacles. And that's what I believe we can use story to teach. How do you use emotion when you are speaking, when you are telling a story? Do you slow down and allow yourself to feel in the moment?
Yes and no. And it depends upon the story. Sometimes the story of the obstacle is where I'm really making fun of myself, of some not brilliant thing that I did. And I actually act out what I did, like climbing up on a chair and cutting 3 of the 4 wires from a fire alarm, thinking that it was the one that was going off, and then realizing it was not at all. It was the one that was down the hall. And so as I acted out, the audience is with me, and it's not so much emotion as much as, oh, I can't believe I was this idiotic, and how many times do us?
Emotion.
Well, yeah, I guess you're right.
It's not painful, sorrowful
it's not,
emotion.
You're right.
Frustration, or I'm such an idiot.
It is. You know what? Yeah. You're right. You're right. So I bring them along with me on this, how you go down, and you're just agonizing over this horrible sound of the fire alarm going off, and then suddenly you go to the end of the hall and you realize you have just taken out this poor little fire alarm that has never done anything to anybody and never will again. And of course, and the learning point is, how many times do we instantly respond to what we think is important without stopping and really weighing the alternatives? We rush to solve it, and then we screw it up. So when I think of emotion as you depicted it, I really think of the powerful emotion that is connected with loss. I've talked about loss before. I've talked about birth. I believe birth and death are the bookends of everything. And oftentimes when I talk, particularly business groups, I am absolutely adamant that the work of business is not the work of selling, but it is to create through enterprise a place that makes the world better. And if you're not doing that, why are you doing that? And I really bookend that with telling the story of the birth of my granddaughter, which they don't know until I get to the end, that I've never birthed any children and that all my children are adopted, and how significant that birth was. And then I'll say this is, and she was born when I was with a pharmaceutical company facilitating this major high-level retreat. And when the child was born and I get the call in the room, they stand and salute this child whom they will never see. And I say to the audience, this is why I tell you this. They saluted a child who they won't see. You and I are in business for children who we won't see. If it is only about today, then you and I are short-sighted. So and I will have people come up to me and it resonates with them. People who have either had children, people who are adopted, or people suddenly get that this world is not about what I get today in the paycheck, but the contribution that I make. And that's one of the messages that I think is carried through story and through emotion.
Well, the reason that I said earlier I believe that you're a very brave speaker is because you are not afraid to tackle anything. And that is what I think is very helpful for new speakers to understand. They want to hide behind content. They want to talk. They don't want to feel. Would you encourage them? Is this something that has evolved for you? Because I know for me, it's a lot easier for me now after 1,000 speeches or whatever I've given, to feel and to speak from deep down in my heart. Is that something that was always there for you, or did you get braver at it over time?
I think I probably got braver with it over time. I'd actually have to go back. And I've been in this business for a long time. And initially it was more like training. It was the hardcore, walk this way, talk this way, do this thing. And yet, even as I reflect back on that, even in my earliest presentations, there was always story connected with why would you want to do this. But I think as I have gotten older and realized that life becomes shorter and shorter, I'm not willing to wait for them to get the lesson someday. If there's something that I have learned that has helped me, if I could pass that along in some way to them, then what am I holding back for? And sometimes, you know this, Doug, people bring us in because we will say the things that the people inside have wanted to say all along or have said, and nobody believes them. And I can turn around and tell them the very truth that they know in their heart of hearts, and they go, oh, it's true. And I really want to say, and you guys know it, this is not rocket science. You've known it all along. You just have to get the courage to say it.
Well, but doesn't that also come from the power of your integrity and congruence with yourself in front of them, to be able to tell the truth to these people that you've never met before?
I would hope so. And I would think the other thing that helps you tell a story with congruity is if you, in fact, have placed it in the context of their reality, that you have really done your homework, that you're not just blazing in with speech 101 off the shelf, but you have said, this is why we're doing this today, because you're going through this, you're going through this, you're going through this, and how many of you are sitting here thinking, I feel like I've been drinking from a fire hose and I can't take any more of this. In fact, I got a company coming up, and they've got some big old buzzword, and it's called OSGM, which is their big initiative. And I'm going to say to them, it stands for OGSM. It stands for, oh gosh, still more. And I know I'll get a laugh with that, and because I'm also saying exactly what they're thinking.
Now that leads me into my question about customizing stories. You've got a client, they've got an agenda. I just did a keynote today where they had a whole agenda for the conference, and storytelling was one of their issues that they wanted addressed, and I was the right guy for it. They gave me a whole lot of information. I did a lot of interviews. How do you find unique stories, or how do you craft some of their stories into your presentation?
I don't think I do that enough, in all honesty. I don't think I do that enough. I will find out things about them. I can use people as examples. And oftentimes, for example, let me go back. I did the Canadian payroll this summer, Canadian Payroll Association. And you always seek someone's permission. But one of the women who was there had just gone through some horrific times. And yet she was present, she was smiling, she was optimistic, and she told me her story. And I said, may I have permission to either call on you or may I say this? And she said, you may say this. And by telling, sometimes people don't want to tell their story, but I can relay it. In fact, this past October, I was with a group of clinical nurses, 3 of whom had been in hospitals in New Orleans. One of whom and if I told you her story now, we would all weep. And what did they want me to speak on but resiliency? And I said, I cannot do that without their permission and without knowing their story, because what the heck do I know? I have never gone through what they've gone through. And when I heard her story, she said, I can't say it without crying, but you may tell the story. And so you find those kinds of gems, and with permission, you don't act it out. This time you are the reporter. You come with me. Imagine what it would be like if this happens, and then this happens to you. That's what happened to Debbie.
One of the things that I wanted to ask you about is some tips for speakers who want to improve their stories. Just a couple of short, succinct little ideas or tips or brainstorming ideas for people that a lot of people don't think story. They think content. They think bullet points. They think PowerPoint. How can you encourage them? What are some tips that you can give people to think story, to find story, to encourage them to be more of a storyteller?
Number one, I carry a little notebook with me. And every time I see someone or I read a sign or something happens, I just jot down a little note. And I actually have a running journal. And I'll go back and write, like at the end of the day. This doesn't happen often. But when you're so moved, at the end of the day, I'll be in Atlanta, Georgia, and you're at Spelman College, and you see this statue of the woman who was one of the heads of Spelman College. And then I go back and say, so, well, how many ways could that story be used? Well, it could make this point, or it could make that point, or it could make this point. And so I just kind of keep this running journal. And then on occasion, you pick it up and you look at it, and it reminds you of things. Because the world is filled with story. You don't have to make up one darn thing. You don't have to give one piece of email joke that came across the computer screen. It is just filled with all kinds of things that are profound, that are passionate, and that are provocative as well as amazingly funny.
So what I'm hearing from you is you spend more time being inspired and then looking in than you do looking out for material.
I think that would be accurate. But I'm also, again, I think that one of the things that helps you find story is you read story. And you look in places where no other people look. So if everybody's reading the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, why would I only read what everybody else is reading? Why wouldn't I want to pick up some type of publication or read some story and I go, oh, that's a great line. That's a great line. So there's things that are even in fiction books that there will be a one line that I know that I can build a story upon.
Have you ever just built a story around a phrase? You heard some great phrase and you go, oh my God, I've got to use that phrase somehow, and then you go looking for a story to build around it?
Actually, there's a phrase that keeps coming over in my head. I have written it down. I will write about it. And I actually heard it from Mark DeSoma at the Tucson University this past year. And it's, and Mark and I are in conversation about it to see how we can use it. But it's break the rules, but keep the faith. I love that line. And with Mark's permission, I think we can build some wonderful stories around that.
I'm sure you can. And I think that's illustrative for many people is that sometimes we start with a gem like that and then go into this, at least I do, I go into this phase of I'm in search of the story. I've got a phrase and it's a great point. It's a phrase that pays, it's branded, it's eloquent, it sticks.
And now I need to find the story. So where is my story about faith? Where is my story about breaking the rules? Do you do that? I sense from just looking into your eyes and listening to you that you just spend a lot of time in contemplative thought, letting this stuff float around and then letting it come out the other side, spending dream time, meditative time, just ruminating time, letting it wander. Is that part of your process?
I think the process of letting it wander is absolutely true. I'd love to be able to say that I get to sit in positions and go, That doesn't happen. You know me, I bounce off the walls. Your to-do list is far too much. But I do spend the first part of the morning in silence and in prayer and in meditation. And like I said, ideas come. I keep a notebook by the side of the bed. And every now and then I wake up and there's something that's there. Or I'll be at the gym and have a notebook and, this idea comes. It can be while you're working out. So it's not that you're just this quiet place. And then there are times in which I have an idea and I don't write it down. Writing to me is just really key. If I don't write it, I've lost it.
Now, do you script the entire story? Do you start to flesh it out further beyond the idea? Or do you just let it ruminate in your head and work it out in your head?
I work it out in my head. And I'm not sure that that's wise advice. I think my stories probably could be better if I wrote them. Initially, I used to write them all out. And then as you become more comfortable with them, you add things, you change things. You realize that at certain places, if I stopped, you watch the audience. And the more comfortable I can become in what is the reason for why I'm telling this story and what is it that I want the audience to walk away with, then I can forget any kind of scripting and just be the story. We can become really stale really fast. And I think that if I would challenge myself to find one new something, I'm working on an idea right now. I'm not going to tell you because it's not ready to come out, but to see a way of using a character that I'm creating in my head to become a vehicle. Now, that's just for me. And I think that as we age, we also have a lot more people around us that we can draw stories from. And I think stories from children are just wonderful examples. There are very few people on the planet that despise children, and children can be great teachers for us. And so I love watching children. And the older we are, great many of our colleagues now have grandchildren. That they're even watching their children parent. Then there's no difference between parenting and leading. Same thing, just different sizes.
It has been an absolute pleasure to just spend some time with you and learn wisdom from you and hear about your stories and your process. Thanks for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
You've just heard how Eileen McDargh acts out moments from her story. Let's spend a few minutes talking about how you can add some acting moments to your story. First, let me give you my definition of acting. Acting is replicating a past reality at a future time and place. Let me say that again. Acting is replicating a past reality at a future time and place. In other words, acting is not false. It's not pretending like you did when you were a kid. It's actually bringing the reality of something that happened in the past into the present. In story theater, the acting moments are called in moments, as opposed to out moments. Let me explain. Traditional storytelling is a narrative form, where you tell the story of something that happened in the past. Therefore, most of the story is told in past tense language, such as, when I was living in Hollywood working on becoming a movie star, I use the word was. When I was living in Hollywood. I call all of the narrative parts of the story, where you're speaking in the past tense, out moments. Because during the narrative, you're looking out at the audience, making contact with the audience, and all of your presentation energy is going out to the audience. I call the acting moments of your story, when you're reenacting a moment from the past, in moments. In other words, when you step in, you literally turn away from the audience. You turn your energy away from the audience. You stop looking at them and relating to them. It's as if they're not even there, and you step into the reality of the moment in the story that you want to show rather than tell. Now, an example of this is when you attend the theater to watch a play. The actors are right there in front of you. They're in the same room, but it's as if they're in another time and place. They relate to each other on the stage, acting out the scenes of the play, but they don't relate to you in the audience. They are in the reality of the moments in the play. For Eileen McDargh, it happens when she becomes a character and takes on the voice and physicality of the person she's portraying. She also talks about reliving the moments, like when she described getting up on a chair to cut some wires in a fire alarm, or standing next to the wall in the Neanderthal cave and blowing the red ochre up on the wall to make a handprint. That's the kind of acting that I'm talking about, what Eileen calls becoming the story rather than giving a book report. To identify the moments in your story where you can step in and show rather than tell, simply look for these three things: actions, reactions, and interactions. The actions of your story, like when Eileen gets up on a chair, are easy to act out. You simply act out getting up on a chair and fiddling with the wires. Now, in some cases, you're talking to yourself while you do it, as if the audience is not there and you're back in the building doing it. And in other cases, you're acting it out while talking to the audience. But you're not looking at the audience. You're actually in the building on the chair fiddling with the wires. Identify the actions in your story that you can act out, and your story will come alive. You can also show the reactions. When you encounter the obstacle in your story, that thing that somebody says that shocks you, or the bad news, or the challenge that you encounter, normally we describe our reaction and our emotions. But in story theater, we don't talk about them, we relive them, we act them out. And then finally, the third piece, interactions. Conversations between you and another character in your story are far more interesting and engaging when you act them out rather than saying, "I said," and then "she said." Eileen gave us a great example when she talked about using voices and accents to become the other character, thereby eliminating the need to say, "I said," and then "she said," because the different voices make it obvious who's talking. The power of these in moments is that they draw the audience into the reality of the moment. They activate the audience members' imagination, the same way their imagination is activated in a movie theater or at a play. The actors in a movie or in a play don't need to talk to us. We, the audience members, go into their reality. So to make your in moments really real, you must feel the emotion of the moment you're portraying. Remember Eileen's Mars story, the Red Planet story? Remember the intimacy of her delivery, the dramatization of blowing the red ochre from her hands onto the wall, how she went poof, and she blew the ochre. And then at the end, her compassion for her audience in the tone of her voice. That's it. That's what I'm talking about. She also talked about playfulness, which is an absolutely essential quality to storytelling. Hey, storytelling is the fun stuff, the stories. Your audience is primed and ready for you to take them on a journey. And you don't need to have studied acting to do this either, so don't make that excuse. Everybody can do this. So go ahead and go for it. Become an actor for the most powerful moments in your stories. Get out of your own way and play. Have some fun. Don't worry about your audience. They know what to do. They've been sitting in movie theaters for years, laughing and crying and getting excited or anxious or scared out of their pants. They've been doing this for years. They know what to do. They know how to play their part. Now it's up to you to give them some thrills, chills, and emotional moments to remember. Now, one last note. In my interview with Eileen, she shared with us a great phrase: break the rules, but keep the faith. Now, that's proprietary material. It belongs to her and the man who coined that phrase. You and I can't use it. It would be unethical and wrong to steal that phrase or to use it without permission of the originator of the phrase. Just as you don't want somebody to come along and steal one of your stories or great phrases, don't steal anyone else's material. You know why? Because you're as creative as they are. and you can come up with your own brilliant phrases. After all, that's what this is all about. Originality, authenticity, and congruence.
All right. Well, that's it for this episode. If you feel that you learned something valuable today, something that you can use that will make your stories stick, stories that make you and your business memorable, marketable, and monetizable, there are 3 things I'd like you to do. First, click on the follow or subscribe button. And while you're there, leave a review. And second, share this podcast with your friends and coworkers. And third, connect with me on LinkedIn. And when you're ready to get serious about taking your stories to the next level, or if you have an important speech, presentation, or TED Talk coming up, or if you just want some guidance on how to go from speaking for free to becoming a paid professional speaker, let's schedule your free 30-minute coaching session where we can get to know each other and see if we're a good fit. And as always, I'd love to hear from you with your questions and comments. Let me know that you're out there listening and learning. You can send an email with your questions, comments, and suggestions to Deborah at DougStevenson.com. That's Deborah, DEBORAH, at DougStevenson.com. All right. Well, thanks for listening. Until the next episode, I'm Doug Stevenson.